Good morning. Good morning. Do you want to hear a story?
Yes.
So this is a story that my clergy mentor, Alice Urbanowitz, told me. This is when I was a clergy intern at New Hope MCC in Santa Rosa. And she was telling me about when she had first met her spouse, Molly. And Molly had certain things she loved to do. Alice had certain things she loved to do. And one of the things Molly loved to do was she loved going camping. Camping was completely her thing. And Alice was not a camper. But Alice really liked Molly. And so if Molly wanted to go camping they would go. You already know how the story is going to turn out, right? And so anyhow, so they actually went, and it was actually, they went on a double date. It was Alice and Molly and another couple from the church, and they went camping, and Molly was so excited. This is going to be such a great trip, and Alice is like, this is making Molly happy, it's making me happy. So they go to bed. And it rains. And it doesn't just rain a little. It rains a lot. And they wake up, and there is 4 inches of water inside their tent. They are wet. Their bed is wet. Everything they've brought with them is soaked. And as Alice told the story, they kind of looked at her. And Alice had this look on her face, like... And at that point, the friends who had come with them on the double date said, Molly, we think it's time for you to take Alice home. And I think that was their one and only camping trip together. But the funny thing is, I mean, this is a story about camping disaster, right? But when Alice told this story, she always told this story like it was the best thing that had ever happened. And I think what that illustrates is the power of love to transform a story. 4 inches of water in your tent, you're wet, your stuff is wet, everything brought with you is soaked. That's bad news, right? Yeah. But for Alice and for Molly, this is a story about love. And love transforms the story. It's a story about Alice whose camping is not her thing, but she is so into Molly that she's willing to go along camping with Molly if that will make Molly happy. And it's a story of Alice not quite having the words to say, honey, I'm not sure I can go along with you on this one much further, but the friends looking and seeing that it was time for Alice to go home and time for Molly to take her. And it was a chance for Molly to say, yeah, I love this camping thing, but I love Alice more. And it's time for Alice to go home, and I'm going to take Alice home. And so this is a story about disaster, but it's really a story about love. And so every time that, and I heard them tell the story several times, and every time they told it, it was just filled with good humor and good cheer and love. And it was a beautiful story. And I kept thinking about that story as I was thinking about the gospel reading today. And the gospel reading sort of divides up into 3 parts for me. The first part is we hear about Mary and Joseph, and we hear that Joseph is in Galilee, but he's not from Galilee. He's from Judah, okay? And nowadays we look at it and we're like, Judah, Galilee, they're all the same thing. But if you read through the New Testament, it's pretty clear. The people from Galilee did not think the Judeans were them, and the people from Judah definitely did not think the Galileans were them. There's a border there. There is a line there, and Joseph crossed it. Joseph is a border crosser, And he crossed the border probably because he's a skilled carpenter, and there was a big Roman imperial building project on the Sea of Galilee. And so he was there to do the work that was available. So he is someone who crossed a border looking for work. And then we're told in this first passage that having crossed the border looking for work, they decide to do this census, which means that they said, all right, border crosser, we don't want you here. We want you to go back to where you came from. Okay? So here we have the story of the border crosser looking for work. And, you know, it's not unlike a lot of stories we hear nowadays. Amen? And people have opinions about whether people should be crossing borders looking for work, right? A lot of people have a lot of opinions. And so I'm not going to say much about it, but I will say this. God could have chosen anyone to be Jesus' parents. God could have chosen anyone in the entire world. And the people that God chose were border crossers who crossed a border looking for work. And if you have opinions about this, you just want to ask yourself, do you want to be on the wrong side of God on this one? So I'm just going to leave that there. But so we have our border crossers. They've been sent back to where they came from. And by the way, this turns out not to be great for them. And so we get to the point where Mary gives birth, and there is no room in the Greek of Luke says guest room. Historically, we've often heard it translated as inn. But anyhow, there ain't no place for them back where they came from. And so they end up laying the child in a manger. And this is one of those stories that has been so infused with love over the years that it's hard for us to really get a feel for what the story was really about. And when we hear that beautiful word manger, I mean, it's French, right? It's like to eat. It sounds like something you'd hear at the Ritz-Carlton. Would you like a manger to place your baby in? I apologize to Madame Klaus, my French teacher, for my bad French accent. But, you know, it sounds very elegant. But the First Nations version has a more blunt translation. It said, she placed him in the food trough. Okay? Now, I want to say, when you get to the place where you put your baby in the food trough, when you get to the place where the cows are like, why is there a baby in our food? Okay? That's the place where there's like 4 inches of water in your tent, right? Things have gone really out of control, and they're not like you planned them to be, and they're not great. You know, when you're rating this on TripAdvisor, it's like, had to put my baby in a feeding trough. 0 stars. Would not go back, you know. So this is a story about, you know, a story about love. But it's also a story about love in some really difficult times. And then we get to the next part of the story, and it's the shepherds part. And they make it clear there were shepherds abiding in the fields. What they mean is the shepherds didn't get to go home at night. Okay? There is no comfy bed. There are no hot showers. They are doing labor out in the field because that's the agricultural needs of their community. But it's not easy for them. It's not a high-status role. It's not a high-paying role. Probably, if we wanted a modern analogy, these are the migrant farm workers, right? These are the migrant farm workers. They're doing hard work. They don't necessarily have a permanent place to be. It's not necessarily terrifically comfortable. But society needs them because without them, society doesn't eat, right? So we have the migrant farm workers are out in the fields, and an authority figure shows up. And they're terrified. And terrified is a good translation of it, but the Greek is even more intense. It says, they feared with a big fear. Okay? Because when you're a migrant farm worker and the authorities show up, it's usually not because they want to make sure that the Cal OSHA standards are being followed, right? You know, you're just wondering whether, you know, are these people here to hassle us? So they are fearing with a big fear. A big fear. And that big word, you've heard of like megabite, which is like being bitten a lot. No, but like there's a bite and there's a megabyte, which is a way bigger. Well, this is a mega fear in the Greek. And so they're fearing with a big fear. And the angels say, chill out. Don't be afraid. I'm bringing you good news. And there's a baby in a feeding trough, which is not normally people's definition of good news. But the angel says, here's what to look for. Here's the signs. And when you see this, you will know the good news is here. And then, as soon as the angel, this authority figure, says this, there are a lot more angels with him singing, which I think if you're fearing a big fear is not actually going to make you fear less, right? This was one fear, and now there's a lot of them. And then the angels return from whence they've come, and the shepherds say, well, let's go check it out. And so the angels go, and they have an encounter with Mary and Joseph and the baby. And they say, by the way, saw some angels. And they said that when we see this situation, when we see this there's 4 inches of water in the bottom of a tent situation, that would be the sign. That would be the sign that good things are coming. And in a way, I sort of think of them as Alice and Molly's friends who are like, okay, it's time to go home. They're the people who sort of say, hey, you might be in this situation which seems like completely hard and difficult and impossible. But God has said there's good things coming for you. And in the end, for me, it all comes down to the fact of when we hear the story in our modern times, we hear manger and we immediately think beautiful, well-lit Christmas scenes, right? Which is maybe not the way it was, because the story has been transformed by love. Because we hear it and we say, there may be 4 inches of water in the bottom of the tent, but we know that Alice and Molly get married, and they have a very nice life together. And we know that this baby may be in a feeding trough, but the baby's not going to stay there. And we know that God, when God makes God's choices, doesn't necessarily pick the powerful or the educated or the well socially connected. God sometimes chooses the border crossers, the farm workers, and comes to them with a message of good news. And that good news is the news of love. Love which can transform the world. Amen. Amen.